So the Communication Skills 2020 syllabus, very, very interesting one. As you know, we also have the online version. So I'm going to be mainly referring to the physical in-person syllabus, but it's just the same with the online one as well. And of course, I'd answer any specific questions with regard to the online one, grade-wise. Of course, today to kind of help keep the focus, we're just going to be looking at grades initial, 1, 2, and 3. So on that note, let's begin. This is what we're going to be doing in today's webinar. We're going to talk a little bit about the need and importance of communication skills. And since this is the first time that we're actually looking under the hood, I thought I should spend a little time talking to you about what is the core of the syllabus, in the sense that normally we tend to look at just the grade-related tasks and the pages that accompany a grade. But I thought I should give you an overview of the syllabus as well. And I thought I should also do the same thing for examinations. And then, of course, deep dive into the grades that's between initial and 3. And finally, of course, a little bit about the relevance of Trinity and the pathways that we have going forward. So the subject of communication is perhaps the most dynamic there's ever been. In fact, if one tries to define it at last count, and this was in 1976, that definition had been changed over 126 times. And in terms of a subject that we study as sociology or psychology, it is a newest branch of study. Having said that, it's the oldest form of communicating. And if you read some really good literature on the subject, you'll realize that from the time we started communicating 5 million years ago, up till the 1500s, it was largely verbal, and a lot of it was oral. And Trinity's syllabus in particular has a slant towards, it says, communication skills, public speaking, but we also imbibe a lot of elements that have to do with the core of communication skills that include things like interpersonal skills, as well as persuasion, and what I like to think as being including intrapersonal skills as well. And of course, we have very many topics, including listening skills and collaboration. So the embodiment of this syllabus is truly wholesome, very, very holistic, and very, very enriching, and provides an excellent stepping stone for a lot of our young learners. Now, for a lot of you who are joining us today, teachers, I'd like for you to know that the subject of communication does not require you per se to have a pre-qualification. Just because you don't have a qualification does not mean you can't communicate, all right? And I think that is true for any life-related subject. That being said, I think all of our assessment opportunities give you a chance to benchmark yourself vis-a-vis an international framework. So even if today you are attending this webinar in the capacity of being a teacher or a parent or even a student, welcome to all of you, because what we're going to be talking about is the wholesomeness of communication, and it doesn't matter what label you have against your name. I think all of us can benefit from the subject. Well, that being said, let's have a look and start off at the very beginning. And that is, most of our young learners come in to learn communication skills. And that's not to say that the older ones don't need it, but certainly a lot of parents understand the validity of the need for this subject, and hence start their children off in school. And when one talks of school and schooling systems, you have to, I have to point this out rather painfully, is a schooling system, or most of our schooling systems, tend to focus on the objectivity of everything. So if you can see on the left-hand side, these were results of 2019, where you have a ridiculous number of students scoring 90% and over. And 99% is perhaps the old 90%. And it's true for almost every board, okay? But it would be a great thing if that held good. The challenge that we all face in our country, and indeed I'd say perhaps all over, is crossing over from the academic world into the world where you're actually required to do, which in this case would mean industry. And that's when you can see that there is a very definite lacuna in our system, which results in either our young graduates not in a position to execute or lacking in several skills. Now, these figures that you see before you are 2019 figures. If I look at 2020 figures, they're going to be even far more stark for the simple reason that we had COVID in the midst of board exams. And I don't need to tell you that the benefit of the doubt was given to a lot of students. So 96% was the old 90% of the year prior. And that causes a lot more confusion. Now, what we do definitely know, and I can tell you this personally since I work with a lot of adults as well, and with a lot of organizations, is industry has come to realize that one of the missing key links in all of this is what we refer to as 21st century skills. And there are quite a few skills that form a part of the 21st century skills, but perhaps the largest sphere of that is occupied by communication skills. So as you can see, the light bulb is on when the skills gap is plugged. And since we're talking about communication skills today, that's going to account for a big shortening of the gap, which you and I as teachers can take forward and help shorten that gap even more. Now, don't take my word for it. Let's just look at what's happening around the world and what several industry bodies have to say about this. So LinkedIn is, of course, perhaps as reliable a source to go to for anything that's professionally driven in terms of data. And you can see over here from the Talent Trend Survey of 2019, they point out various countries and the need for soft skills. And India ranks number 3, where there's a very definite need of 95% of people quizzed, that's in terms of future recruiting decisions, are going to definitely involve soft skills. Now, the reason why some of the European countries or countries which are to the extreme right have a lower percentage, it's because these skills are already built into the education system from a very, very early age. So currently, as you can see with a lot of the developing economies, there is a mismatch in the skill set requirement, and that is what we're really addressing to do. And it's not just here that you see it, you'll see it even here. For instance, in the 4 trends that were transforming 2019, soft skills accounted for them. And if one looked at that even further, when it came to hiring people, and you compared it with the 2018 workplace report, you would see that important hiring factors were soft skills as a standalone requirement and a combination of soft skills and hard skills, which accounted for 92%. And when things did go wrong, the close to 45% of that blame lay purely in the soft skills area. So as you can see, my dear teachers, we have a lot of work to do, because this is definitely the need of the hour. And I don't want to even start to get into the need for good, strong communication just in maintaining a healthy balance in life. So there is both a need at the workplace, there is a need for communication in the home place, there is a need for communication in school and academia. So it's a very, very deeply evolving subject and a very, very enveloping subject also as we go forward. Even in terms of what we would call the sisterhood of skills, communication skills gets the kind of importance it does for the very simple reason that with communication comes the opportunity for leadership and collaboration and various leadership position skills. And you can see over here in this particular slide that whether you talk to talent developers or whether you talk to executives or whether you talk to HR people, they essentially are all saying the same thing, is leadership, communication, collaboration, and of course, role-specific skills is the need of the hour. And we see this coming into 2020. Speaking of 2020, one would have thought that, well, so much happened. Was there a need to retool or reskill yourself? And yes, that's exactly what LinkedIn has predicted. It says that learning and development has become the focus of 2020 and of course 21, since 20 kind of got hung in suspension. And you can see that we are now in that era of upskilling and reskilling. And by upskilling, we mean learning new skills within the same job function, and reskilling is learning new skills for a different job function. Now, both these positions require us to apply ourselves, and the world is really going to need the subject of communication skills, and you as teachers are going to be in that forefront in helping solve this problem. In terms of money and allocation of resources, also you can see that when we checked with the learning and development pros in our country, 72% expect there to be higher budget allocations for learning and development. And even when one talks of artificial intelligence and mechanized learning and all of those words, which mean heavy automation, we still see that the soft skills is reigning supreme. And when we look at the top 5 position of soft skills, which many of them, in fact, if not all of them, are covered in our syllabus, there is no change between last year's position and this year's position. So creativity, still at position number 1, persuasion, collaboration, and adaptability, still in their same positions, emotional intelligence making a reappearance all over again. And this, of course, has a huge bearing on us going forward because of the link, or rather the perhaps inverse related link between EQ and IQ. Okay, so I think I've said enough to explain or perhaps convey to you the gravity of the importance of the subject. And in case I haven't, then I'm going to leave this screen up for a little while for you to actually get some anecdotal insight into what some of the best known names or leaders of the free world or the ancient world for that matter, since Aristotle is also there and Plato is also there, have had to say about the subject of communication. And if you look very closely, the very first one actually speaks volumes, where Warren Buffett says the single largest investment he made in terms of a best investment, and this is a man who's known for making investments, is this communication skills course that he took that transformed his lives, which hence prompted him to make offers to all young students and says, if you want to be 50% more valuable, then just learn that one skill, and immediately it'll change your bottom line and perhaps your top line as well. Of course, there are some pretty funny ones. You can see Steve Jobs' quote over there is very tongue-in-cheek when he talks about Microsoft PowerPoint, and he says, people who know what they're talking about don't need PowerPoint, which of course I think is exceedingly valid, because a presentation is not a PPT, as many people learn pretty late in life. You are the presentation and PowerPoint is just the aid. And of course over here, this is completely tongue-in-cheek and touche to talk about Keynote that Apple makes. But there are of course some very, very relevant sayings, particularly from Barack Obama, who addresses the whole issue of social media. And I think one of my personal favorites is the one from Plato, which says, wise men talk because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something. And when you frame that quote in the context of today's social media and everyone's utterances on social media, you can't help but think that we've somehow lost the wisdom of communication somewhere down the line. And these are not the only people who have some things to say. I think you'd also agree with what the Dalai Lama says here. We have global communication, and yet confrontation is more common than dialogue. And so there are lots of thought that's gone into communication by several people over the years. And I think on a funnier note, and perhaps to kind of keep this light, Warren Buffett again says, if you can't communicate, it's like winking at a girl in the dark. They can't hear you, they can't see you, so it's pretty much of no use. Well, this hopefully tells you a little bit about the need for communication skills and the importance of it. Let's now deep dive into the syllabus and specifically look at elements within the syllabus. Now, just for your record, teachers, this is the syllabus that I'm referring to. It is the 2020 syllabus. It came out and became valid as of September 2020. The digital one that is there right now is this very one itself, which has been adapted for the online medium. All right. In fact, even if you're looking at the 2019 syllabus, there is no change between the 19 syllabus and the 20 syllabus. It's just that we had a chance to detail out the assessment criteria and the attainment descriptors grade-wise in the 2020 syllabus. But here I want to just point out that there is an implicit note for language, because in communication skills, the assumption is that English language is in place. So we are not assessing the English language. We are assessing your ability at being communicative. So hence, there is an underlying need for your English to already be at some established level, which at the lowest levels is a B1 on the CEFR. And for some of the higher grades, it's B2. And then, of course, from grades 6, 7, and 8, it is a C1. Now, don't worry, a lot of the children already seem to possess this. And in very many cases, I also want to go one further to say that sometimes communication and the transference of meaning happens also within a cultural context. So it is possible that you may make yourself understood in ways over and beyond just pure language. Okay. Now, let's look at the core syllabus, or the core of the syllabus. We're going to look at these things: the relevance of the syllabus, a little bit about the levels and the age guidance, the attainment bands, the recognition to all of these qualifications, the concept of total qualification time. I've put the relevant page numbers from the syllabus so that if you've got the syllabus in front of you or you're looking at it a little later, you know what I was referring to. And then, of course, we're going to look at point 7, which is the employability and the learning skills, or the 21st century skills that this syllabus in particular helps bring out. So let's look very firstly at the relevance of this syllabus. It's for candidates who want to focus on a practical, creative task that reflects the real world. So it's not some archaic discipline. It is ever-changing, ever-evolving, and so too are the mechanics that we use in our assessment processes to ensure that it's a sign of times. Similarly, it also assesses candidates' abilities to deliver talks and presentations, to develop and express their own ideas, and to listen, assimilate, and respond in discussion on familiar and even unfamiliar topics at the higher grades. And finally, it, of course, allows candidates to create their own program of talks and presentations and areas that they have a particular interest in. And finally, of course, when you develop all of these skills, you're developing the most invaluable 21st century skills of communication, creativity, building confidence, and in both the educational and the workplace scenario. Now, very specifically, candidates develop these range of transferable 21st century skills, and this is listed on pages 3 and 4 of the syllabus. I'm not going to read it out for you because it will be there in front of you. I've just chosen to highlight number 9, intrapersonal, because it's not mentioned over there. But I think, as many teachers over here would agree, that a lot of the transformational process comes about when students start to evaluate a lot of what they feel about something within themselves. And I think intrapersonal communication is perhaps the ideal starting block before it gets to an interpersonal communication, because it must sound right to you before it can sound right to anyone else. It must pass your logic. It must pass your sensitivity to whether it's value-driven or whether it's ethically driven. And if it passes your test, means it's perhaps worthy of going out over there. So which is why I've chosen to highlight the intrapersonal element over there. Now, when we look at the ages and the guidance, this is just for a general understanding. In the context of education in the UK, and I'm giving you UK as an example because Trinity follows the UK system, which is the regulated qualification framework. And in that system of education, there are essentially 8 levels. Okay. Now, levels 1, 2, and 3 are typically what you would do in school and up to grade 12. Okay. Now, within the context of Trinity, we call our entry level, we have one grade of an exam known as the initial grade, which is meant for candidates who are about 5 years and over. Now, while this is not written in stone, okay, and you're welcome to do challenge it, all right, this is just a guidance, all right. Similarly, what we call as our foundation levels, which is grades 1 to 3, which form level 1 of the RQF, we say that it's children who are about 7 years, 8 years and over. And level 2 of the RQF is our intermediate level, wherein we look at grades 4 and 5, and that's what I will be looking at in the next webinar. And it's intended for learners who are about 12 years and over. Excuse me. Level 3, which is the advanced level, is meant for learners who are, that's grades 6, 7, and 8 of Trinity. So hence, I think it becomes quite clear that grades 6, 7, and 8 are not to be paired with the schooling system in India. All right. Grades 6 and 8 is based on the RQF. All right. Which means that a child should ideally be, or the learner should be between 16 and 18 approximately. All right. And that's around about the time when they finish high school, which is why you finish a level 3 qualification of the RQF when you're about 18. Okay. Now, moving forward from there, this is how we work with the marking system. Anything which is 85 or more is a distinction. 75 to 84 is merit. 65 to 74 is pass. And 64 and below is below pass. Now, I want to just take a quick minute, if you just excuse me while I grab a sip of water. Let me tell you a little bit about the recognition, because this comes up quite often. So if you read the very first paragraph, Trinity as an international examination board is regulated by Ofqual, which is the Office of Qualifications and Examination Regulation in England, and has sister equivalences in Northern Ireland, in the European Union, and in Wales. Okay, now specifically in the UK, Trinity's grade 6 and upwards communication skills for individual are eligible for UCAS points. So we have a lot of students, by the way, in India, who, when they do, whether it's a communication skills exam or a speech and drama exam or any of our drama suite exams, if it's a grade 6 and above, you get UCAS points based on how you scored. So if you, for instance, in a grade 6, you just get a pass, you get 8 UCAS points. If you get a distinction, you get 12, all right? And so on and so forth with grade 6, 7, and 8, all right? Now, where do you use UCAS points? Well, essentially, it is UCAS stands for the University and College Admission Service. So when you're applying online to universities and colleges, you would do this through their website, and you would mention what qualification you already have, if you have one, and automatically these points get added into your application process. Now, on the right-hand side, what you also see, and which is there on page 6 of the syllabus, is every grade of our syllabus has a recognition number. And if you want to verify that, then you can go on to the government website in the UK, which I've mentioned that link, which is register.ofqual.gov.uk. You can type in the number of the qualification that's there in the syllabus, and you can see that, yes, this is a recognized, validated qualification. Okay, so that's about this. Now, this next particular slide is a very interesting one because it gives you a very sound way to understand how does one teach, or what should be the surround in which one teaches. So to put it very simply, we say that if you are at the level of an initial grade, and an initial grade has its own learning outcomes, assessment criteria, and so on, that in order to be able to reach that level of mastery, that you should have spent about 8 hours. Now, that could be in 45-minute lessons multiplied by X number of lessons, or 1 hour lessons for 8 times. Okay, so this is the guided learning, which means that you got assistance through some form of formalish education by someone who certainly understands the subject. And of course, it's better if someone is qualified and trained in the subject. Okay, so the guided learning hours is, you can see in the case of the initial grade, is 8 hours. Now, if a teacher is going to work with a student for 8 hours, it stands to reason that the teacher will give the child some element of homework, some element of preparatory work, some element of rehearsal time, some element of where the student applies what they have learned in other contexts of their lives. So that we refer to as the independent learning hours, which means the teacher teaches, and that's guided learning. Independent learning is when the young student takes it on to the real place and applies it. And when you add the two together, you get a total qualification time of 40 hours. Now, this again is there on page 7. So as you can see, as you go higher, there's certainly a little more work that needs to happen. Now, moving on from there, let me just tell you a little bit about how does one progress. So if you recall, I mentioned that we have 8 grades in the UK in terms of education. By the way, we have the same equivalents in India, except that we don't call them levels of education. We just know them by their nomenclatures, which means we say a BCom or a BA. So a BCom or a BA is the same as a level 6 in the UK, which in Trinity's communication skills syllabus is benchmarked by an LTCL. All right. If you have something lower than that, it's an ATCL, which is the equivalent of first year of college, senior college, that is. And like I mentioned earlier, in a grade 8 is the equivalent of high school or passing grade 12, which is the RQF level 3. All right. So normally what one tends to do is a lot of the students who are studying these subjects of communication or drama, they go off to perhaps study in the UK through UCAS, are getting their points, which helps them in the admission process. And of course, now this is not universal, so hence this needs to be looked at. When you're applying to a particular university, you need to check with them whether they accept UCAS and so on and so forth. But essentially, it does pave the way for you to be able to do that. Now, in the case of the qualifications that you could do after an LTCL, could be a master's, or it could be a PhD program that you could also do. So this is where you could take your qualifications, you can thereafter use it. And this is where I want to point this out very, very carefully to say, don't look at any subject of Trinity's in isolation. Look at it in terms of you've got communication skills, but now if you marry communication skills with our integrated skills in English, it's going to build a whole different subset of skills, which is very, very relevant. In fact, in the IGCSE system, they talk about subjects like global perspectives and stuff like that. Quite honestly, it's already there. So if you're doing this with your kids, and you as teachers, no matter what you teach, please feel free to blend. Don't get stuck in a silo. What we need now more than ever is more of generalists and less of specialists. All right. So the ability to cross, the ability to learn, the ability to adapt is what you should really be able to take out of all our future learnings going forward. Now, that brings me, of course, to this last part over here, which talks about employability and learning skills. This is there in great detail on page number 4 of the syllabus. What I have before you is just a plain reproduction of it, done digitally and highlighted, of course, but you have in your freedom and flexibility to please go through this. All right. So there are 2 of these. There are a total of 8 skills which are referred to. That's the first 4, and this is the next 4. So I'm not going to read through this, and certainly you can do this and you'll probably digest it or ingest it a lot better in your own time. But I do definitely now want to talk to you a little bit about examinations and what all do you have in terms of aids to help you. So the first thing you must understand is that this syllabus is predicated on 4 foundational skills. Thereafter, grade-wise, as one progresses, the level and the complexity of learning must also evolve. So you have learning outcomes, which are again predicted grade-wise, all right, or every couple of grades. And then, of course, you have assessment criteria, which means as a syllabus, if I lay out this is what you're going to learn, I should, as an examination board, also be able to tell you that this is how you will be assessed on these criteria. And then finally, within those criteria, you might do one thing very well and something not so well, in which case you will have distinctions in the attainment descriptors. And that is what will tell you what a distinction looks like vis-a-vis what a merit looks like and what a pass looks like and what a below pass looks like. All right, so this is, you must get this four together for you to understand this. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. Now, these are the definitions, the foundational skills, okay? This syllabus is predicated on four of them: communication, interaction, analysis, and performance. The learning outcomes, again, the definition is here and it's on page 9 in the syllabus, all right? The assessment criteria, okay, that's provided grade-wise, and the attainment descriptors is provided grade-wise. Now, I'm rushing through this part because I feel that I'm running a little behind time. I very quickly just wanted to ask you, with your permission, is it all right if I do exceed by about 10 minutes? If you can just type yes in the chat, I will know if that's permissible. If not, I will cut myself to fit in 4. All right, thank you so much. Brilliant. Okay, that's really helpful. Okay, so let's really dive now into the grades, okay? And before I get into the actual meat of the grades and what to do and what not to do, I want to just help first, just put you at ease. And I want to tell you that this is something to consider in the way you approach the teaching of the subject, okay? I've seen a lot of teachers, and I know that there are lots of practices that go around and someone's trying to ask whether this is right and this is wrong. I want to just lay it all very much threadbare for you and say, relax, take a deep breath, okay? Everything that you need to prepare a candidate for an assessment lies completely within the grasp of this approach. You have to consider the skills, those are the foundational skills I referred to, and the learning outcomes of the grade. Now, with that, you blend in a little bit of the assessment criteria, and then you benchmark this ability with the attainment descriptors. Okay, so that's why this little umbrella over the book. Now, I'm going to take you through an example and show you how. So let's look at this. This is typically the matrix, okay? Not that one, but just a matrix for grade initial. So what I've done is the very first line I've put over there, the learning outcomes, because that is the most important. You want, as a teacher or as a parent, we have to be able to answer what is it that the child will develop through after going through teaching with you. So it's very clear. They should be able to participate in simple informational conversational exchanges and communicate prepared information clearly and appropriately. They should also be able to describe and discuss an event and an object or picture. Now, that is the learning outcome. Now, what are the skills that we're going to use? So in the case of task 1, which is there in the syllabus grade, all right, communication and interaction are the skills we're looking at. In the case of task 2, we're looking at communication, interaction, analysis, and performance, which means now there's some level of thinking, some element of reflection. And in task 3, we're going to look again at communication, interaction, and analysis. All right. So now you will see key things over here. Interaction is coming in all the skills. All right. In all the tasks, which means there's going to be a little bit of a back and forth with the examiner. And that's what truly benchmarks achievement is. If I say I'm going to do a communication skills exam, I certainly have to be able to have an interpersonal communication with whoever. Now, this is where I've inserted a red band to say, just purely on the basis of the above 2 documents, you can start to develop small tasks using the learning outcomes and the skills from the realm of the candidate's awareness, interests, and curriculum. So forget the tasks that are there in Trinity syllabus for the exam. All right. We do not train students for the exam. We train them in the skill and in the learning outcome for life. They should, if we've done a good job as teachers, they should be able to demonstrate that skill every day of the week, not just for one exam. All right. So please, as teachers, feel completely free to start to develop your own tasks that perhaps allow the candidate to maybe talk about their favorite toy that they've brought to class by mistake. Okay. And this is where your ingenuity, your experience, and even your playfulness as a teacher will truly be rewarded by the students, because there's a lot of fun just in the learning and teaching process. Okay. And I've said over here, from the realm of the candidate's level of awareness. So this is not about trying to make the poor child sound smart or appear smart. It is about just getting them to be who they are. All right. So we take it from the level of their interests, from their curriculum. In fact, this is where a lot of the schools that I've helped blend the program into the curriculum is we are using, for instance, the geography teacher and the science teacher and the math teachers using communication skills in her class. All right. And who would have thought that possible? And yet it is. Communication is common to any subject, including the Hindi teacher and the Gujarati teacher for that matter. All right. Now, once you've done this, this is when you now, and your children can do something, this is when you need to look at the assessment criteria. Okay, and the assessment criteria are going to be shades, okay, of what is there in the learning outcome. So if in the learning outcome we said participate in simple informal conversational exchanges, in the assessment criteria we're going to say is able to present using simple vocal skills meaningfully and clearly. So we're going to clarify that, all right, and say this is the criteria that you need to meet. Okay, and this is done again for all 4 of them. Now, to know how a candidate is doing, all right, which is always the big question, is how did I get a distinction and why did I not get a pass, or why did I get a merit and not a distinction? It's there in black and white, actually, and in this particular case in red, green, and blue, but it's there in front of you. So what I've done is I've taken the attainment descriptors for the sections of distinction, merit, and below pass. I've omitted pass for paucity of space, but I've taken the common line, all right, and highlighted in red. So for instance, your candidate will get a distinction if the work presented was audible and clear most of the time, and the candidate was able to use simple vocal skills meaningfully. Now, if they don't do that, it means they're doing it 1 rung lower, which is when a merit will come in. The work presented was audible and clear most of the time, just like distinction, and the candidate was able to use simple vocal skills with some meaning, not meaningfully. Okay, and a candidate will be in a below pass if they were hesitant or lacked audibility or clarity completely. Okay, so this is where you now know how to benchmark how a candidate is doing skill-wise within that grade. Okay, so you can break this up itself into 9 lesson plans based on just what I presented to you here. Okay, similarly, if you look at some of the other parameters, they're all written over here. All that is in green is similar in terms of what they're evaluating. Okay, but the language is changing. So for instance, in a distinction, there was some awareness of audience and competence in delivering the tasks. All right, over here it says there was a basic awareness of audience and some competence. All right, so it does not talk of complete competence, it just talks of some competence. And if a child does not pass, it's because there was little or no awareness of audience, or quite frankly, no competence. Okay, and similarly, in the case of the blue text, the candidate, there was a good interaction. So this is the interactive element with the examiner with a clear understanding of the material, which means the child presented whatever they knew they were presenting and knew it backwards as well. And I'm not talking about learning by rote backwards. I'm talking about you could question them on it from any angle and they had ownership of their material. Whereas in a merit, there was some good interaction with the examiner and a reasonably secure understanding of the material. Over there, it was a clear understanding of the material. Over here, it is reasonably secure. So if you can just look at the difference between these two, you now know what work you need to do on as a teacher. Okay. And you don't even need an exam in your preparatory level. All right. You can better prepare based on what we are giving you. And similarly, of course, in the case of below pass, we've done that as well. So I hope I've made this very clear as an example of how to read the learning outcomes, the skills, how to implement, how to then use the assessment criteria and attainment descriptors to do some level of course correction in what you're teaching. With that, I'm now going to get straight into the grades. So, grade initial 1, 2, and 3, task 1 is common. Okay. Now, this is a task where the candidate engages in a brief conversation led by the examiner on one or two of the following topics. So the only distinction between each of the grades is the kind of topics. All right. So as you can see at the initial grade, they're talking about where they live or their favorite meal or food or drink, which coincidentally is what exactly we're doing if you want to strengthen the child's English. And the reason why I bring this up here is because very often when you're working with children, irrespective of which board of school they go to, whether it's an IB, an IG, Cambridge, or anything, quite frankly, when they are young learners, for almost all our children, we need to secure the English. All right. So even if you choose to use our Jesse syllabus in your classroom teaching, it is going to help better prepare a candidate to be able to do this anyway. And that is what many of the very big and good teachers do, is their earlier candidates, when their English is just coming together, they let them do the Jesse exam because that's a speaking and listening assessment, but where the focus is on getting the English right. And it's done literally in a very self-help kind of way, where we even get down to the level of detailing which verbs in which tense and what should be the areas of topic. One of those include the area where you live, your home, your classroom, and so on and so forth. So again, at the cost of me repeating myself, this is a huge opportunity for you as teachers to be a little familiar with our syllabus, and you will never be short of material to teach your children, because you will know, okay, with this batch, I can do more of communication skills. With the other one, I want to do a little bit more of language. Okay, with this particular batch, I think I can throw in a little bit of acting or maybe bring out some element of drama. So you can use all the syllabi in your lesson planning. And that's really what we'd love for you to take away from all of our syllabi. Now, coming back to this and how do you prepare for this? Okay, that I'm going to be touching on when we do the professional development series. Today, I'm talking nothing about teaching. When we do the professional development series, I will take you through how to teach for it. But today, it's more about just getting familiar with the tasks and pointing out some of the obviously glaring things. So, for instance, what is a good thing that we want to have developed? A natural, easy, flowing exchange, ability to participate in the conversation, spontaneity, ownership of thought, some vocal skills, a little bit of eye contact, awareness that it's not just me, but there are perhaps others, in this case, the examiner, sensitivity to responses, which means the interactive element, body language. All right. Now, what you shouldn't do, okay, is make the poor child practice. All right. You don't practice how to say hello to someone or to have a conversation when you meet them on the road. All right. It's a skill that you develop over time. So let's approach it from that way. So hence, and this is, I'm telling you this based on several feedback that we've heard over time, is very often we are approaching these tasks, either we are over-rehearsing them, it appears very mechanical, lacking in emotion, lacking in any sort of personal engagement. Very often teachers are trying to see what other teachers are doing for this particular grade and copying a lesson plan blindly without understanding the nuance of it. So hence I've said, this is what you should be doing, this is what you shouldn't be doing, all right? Similarly, if you take grade initial task 2, now here I've tried to help you with examples. So here the candidate gives a talk about a personal memorable event, okay, for about 2 minutes. What are the skills being looked at? Communication, interaction, analysis, and performance. All right. Now, there's of course, the candidate can sit or stand for this task. All right. Now, I've given you this as an example. If you were working as a teacher in a classroom, how would you help your children build up something? So if they were talking about a personal memorable event, it could have been a holiday, maybe a Christmas holiday, or during the Christmas break. So again, borrowing from the rubrics of how we teach English, in terms of brainstorming, you'd work with what, when, where, why, how, who, which, etc. And the children start to fill in with answers. And before you know it, you start to string it along, all right, in a manner in which they think is important, all right. It must be generally comprehensible. That's where you and I come in. But a child telling you that he went to Goa and then adding that he went by air later is all right. It doesn't mean that he had to say logically that he went by air to Goa. All right, so these little flexibilities we keep, okay, to allow the authentic development of the child. Now, as you can see, I've given you some very clear examples of the talk points over here, and quite possible the interaction elements that the examiner might engage on. So you'll ask him things like, or ask her, did you have fun? What were you doing in this picture? What do you remember the most? Would you like to go back? All right. So you're very much allowed to have visual aids. Just a caution over here. A visual aid is meant to be an aid. It's not meant to substitute the child. So please, something small, manageable. In the digital format, we talk about using it through PowerPoint only because of convenience and comfort. You are, of course, still encouraged to perhaps hold something which is screen size, quite possibly an A4 size document, maybe laid out in landscape format, and on that to have a couple of photographs. It's okay if you have 2 or 3 of them, rather than try and make one huge chart which the poor child has to wobble into the exam room with. All right, so that's grade initial task 2. Grade initial task 3 and grade 1 task 3. This is some insight into it. All right, as you can see, grade initial task 3 talks about the candidate gives a talk about a small object or picture they brought into the exam room. And just below the red line is what grade 1 task 3 does. The candidate gives a talk about the value and significance of 2 small objects. So again, when you're preparing a candidate over here, you're going to get them to describe and discuss an event or an object, creating perhaps visual clues. Okay, so maybe they arrange their visual aids in the order of their talking points. So they learn no script by heart, yet they now have a flow based on the pictures that they're sharing with the examiner. All right, completely done. In fact, normal to do if you were an adult. All right, so please, learning a speech by heart, completely out of the question. That's not communication. Okay, again, I've given you some elements of what to look for and what are the danger signs. You're all welcome to use screenshots if you'd like of this. But now let me deep dive a little bit more and get a little more into the meatier ground, so to speak. Grade 1 task 2, wherein a candidate talks about one of the following topics, either a remarkable person or a favorite holiday. So now you will note from grade initial, talking about a memorable event, pretty much the same logic would follow for talking about a favorite holiday. So your favorite holiday could be a memorable event as well. All right. So here I've given you an example of how to do all 3 of the tasks. So again, the one which is color coded in yellow is the questions, the prompt questions to get children to work on and their responses. And again, in the case of if you're developing a remarkable person, I've given you prompt questions like who is the person, describe the person, tell us about the qualities of and attributes, what significant achievements did they have, what contribution did they make, who benefited, why did you choose this person, what do you like most about this person, and any anecdotal information or an incident from their life. Now, please, again, the aim is for a child to tell you who is their remarkable person. It could be their mom, it could be their dad, it could be anybody. It is not for us as teachers to pick up Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and say, he is the remarkable person you will talk about. This is not a demonstration of how much you know. It is more, in fact, an ability of what the child can share from their realm. All right. So similarly, if they talk about their favorite activity, what is it? Describe it. What do you need for it? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? Like, for instance, many of the children will talk about games. So if it's perhaps a good time to also give them a couple of value lessons and say, is playing computer games all the time good? Or if they sound their own caution, that's even better. When do you do this activity, and so on and so forth. So again, of course, you can click a screenshot of this and this will help. Now, moving forward, let's look at some of the meatier grades. Grade 2, task 2. I'm almost at the end, so just bear with me, please. Grade 2, task 2, where a candidate talks about why I love a book, or why I love a film, or why I love a TV program, or why I love a play. All right. Now, over here, very clearly, again, I've given you a rubric to use in the case of, let's say, a book. You can easily interchange the categories if you're talking about a movie or a play, or for that matter, even a computer game. So the name of the book, author, director, illustrator, publisher, main characters, the cast, if it's a movie, the genre, is it considered a great film for children? Is it an adventurous film for children, or it's a science fiction and a fantasy film? A little bit about the setting. So the story takes place over here, and then it moves on from there, and this person is the protagonist, so and so is the antagonist. A little bit about the synopsis and plot outline. Then most importantly, this is why you love the book. So don't give us just general information. Now we want to know, where's your investment in it? So what was your favorite part or feature? 5 to 7 reasons why you really love this. Okay. Now, this can be anything. If, for instance, it's a book, maybe I love it because my aunt gave it to me for my birthday. Okay. So again, nothing profound, but something simplistic, something authentic from the child's side. In terms of recapping stories, I've shared with you an adapted version of a story map developed originally by Gustav Freytag in the 1850s, where he talks about starting in with the setting, building in the rising action, the key crucial moments, and then, of course, the dinner or the falling action. All right, so again, something to use as part of a lesson plan. I'm sure you already do this. Now, let's look at the little more complicated one, which is talking about the planning and preparation for a special event, which is grade 2, task 3. The simple largest mistake that I've seen happen over here is everybody talks about what happened on the event day. And quite frankly, that is not the focus. As you can see, my way of preparing a candidate would firstly be to, on the left-hand side, is to brainstorm with them what their talking points are, and then to lay those talking points out in an order of, from a reverse order. So if, let's say, they were planning for a birthday, which is the event day, to then work backwards and say, so what did you do 1 month prior, and 3 weeks prior, and 2 weeks prior, and 1 week prior, and maybe in the last 24 hours. So these metrics you can change, the event you can change. It can be someone's golden jubilee. It can be the science fair in school. It can be not only in the past, it can be for an event coming up in the future. All right. Bottom line, please don't talk about the event. We want to know about the planning and preparation for the event. So it's about the right logical sequencing, all right, and your ability to convey that sequencing in terms of a plan and a strategy. Okay, so that's what we're really looking for. Now, just to let you know, this is what grade 3, task 2. And this is now when it starts to get a little serious, because we are now talking about persuasion, where a candidate will talk about why I am concerned about global warming, or what I would like to see more of, which is normally more of sport and music and classroom timetabling, or why I think plastic should be banned. So again, my way of working over here would be to first create a brainstorm, but even before brainstorm, to arrive at a topic, I would use a free listing activity, followed by a brainstorming and a webbing and clustering. Thereafter, I would use the whole basis on which persuasion was developed, which is Aristotle's 3 rhetorical appeals. Of course, this is a little complicated for children, but this is, as teachers, you'll find this easy enough, where we talk of the 3 appeals: logic and logos, ethos, which is a sense of purpose and a sense of who you are and your credibility as the person who's making the pitch, and of course, pathos, wherein you're relying on clues from your audience, you're relying on the emotional element of towards the topic, towards you as a speaker. So, and then how do we blend all of this? And then, of course, when you're putting the speech together, this is the kind of rule that you'd follow. Is firstly, do you have a topic? What do you think about it in yourself before you are even ready to share it with anybody else? So what are the intrapersonal feelings? And then who's your audience? So as you can see, they ask you to define your audience in very many of the cases. All right. So you say, okay, I'm talking to my school friends. So now, if you know your audience, you know a little bit about the demographics, you know how they feel towards you as well as towards the topic. You then are very clear with your intent, which is perhaps to inform them a little bit and maybe then to persuade them. But essentially, once you know what your intent is, thereafter you begin your brainstorming. And finally, it's about crafting that personal message, which has maybe opens with a quote or a witticism or a story with an example, and so on and so forth. So we will get into all of this in the professional development series. I hope we can do one. In fact, that's where I will come to in the feedback form, where I ask you for, do you want to do a professional development series? at grade 4 and grade 6. Please let us know if you'd like us to do that. The last one actually is where you talk about recommending a place of interest. So over here, I'm going to just stop sharing to start a new share. Let me just see. Sorry, just give me a second. I'm going to share with you actually one of my own students' work. If you just give me a second, please. Yep, there it is. So this is a particular student of mine who was talking about Sri Lanka. This is a PDF, so I'm scrolling through. So here you can see she decided to talk about Sri Lanka. So she made this in the form of visual cue cards, which were done on a PowerPoint, but we printed them out in an A4. She did an in-person exam. If you were doing this as a digital exam, then you would keep this as a PowerPoint and you would move through your slides. So again, when you talk about a place of interest, you give it first the neutral treatment, which is a little bit about the place, elements to consider about what factors go into making a holiday a holiday. So from things like breathtaking beauty to aquatic and marine life, fauna, flora, and again, personal images. So great chance for her to engage with the examiner and say, and here we did this, and there we did this, and many people from other countries came and were doing this, and I saw many other things. So as many visual cues as you can use, there's less to rely on about trying to remember your talking points. It's all in front of you. It also gives the examiner a great opportunity to interact with you and ask you, oh, look at this giraffe. What is he doing over here? Did they make any noise? And that whole interactive element comes about. So again, please use visual aids, but do not overly complicate it. If you don't need to use a visual aid, please don't use it. If it's going to aid the communication process, then by all means use it. All right. So as you can see, this is where she spoke a little bit about it, gave some third-party information about Sri Lanka, about the language, about the religion, and so on and so forth. All right. So this is where I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. I'm sorry. Let me just stop over here for a quick breath